Think about the last time you sat at the dinner table with your family. Your daughter was telling you a story about her day at school. Her eyes were bright and she was looking right at you for a reaction. But you weren't actually there. Physically, you were in the chair, but neurologically, your brain was 3 towns away, obsessing over a disgruntled client's email or a looming midnight deadline. You were nodding and smiling, but your internal world was screaming. This is what I call the dinner table hijack. It is the moment where the bridge between who you are as a mother and who you are as a CEO completely collapses. You feel like a fraud in both worlds. You're too distracted to be a good parent and too exhausted to be a good leader. This isn't a character flaw or a sign that you aren't cut out for the hustle. It is a specific, measurable, biological disconnect happening inside your skull. I spent years trying to willpower my way out of this feeling, but you can't outrun your anatomy. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix the PFC amygdala disconnect so you can finally be present where your feet are. To fix the problem, we have to look at the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. This area sits right behind your forehead, and in the world of entrepreneurship, it is your most valuable asset. The PFC is responsible for what we call executive functions. This includes logical reasoning, long-term planning, impulse control, and the ability to switch between complex tasks without losing your mind. When you are sitting in a boardroom making a pivot that will save your company, that is your PFC at work. It's the part of you that can look at a terrifying spreadsheet and say, okay, here is the logical step-by-step plan to fix this. Research shows that the PFC is the primary regulator of our actions and thoughts. It's the part of the brain that makes us human. But here is the catch. The PFC is also incredibly expensive to run. It requires a massive amount of glucose and oxygen to function at a high level. Because it is the most evolved part of the brain, it's also the most fragile. It's the first thing to go offline when we get tired, hungry, or stressed. For women in the sandwich generation, those of us balancing growing businesses with aging parents and young children, the PFC is under constant siege. You are asking your internal CEO to work 24 hours a day without a break. Eventually, the CEO gets burnt out and stops answering the phone. When the PFC weakens, you lose your ability to regulate your emotions. You start making reactive decisions instead of proactive ones. You snap at your team. You overthink simple emails, and you find yourself paralyzed by analysis paralysis. You might think you just need more coffee or a better project management app, but the reality is that your PFC is starving for regulation. It has lost its connection to the rest of the brain, specifically the emotional center. This executive center is supposed to act like a top-down controller, sending signals to the rest of the brain to keep things calm. When it's healthy, it can look at a stressful situation and say, this is a challenge, not a catastrophe. But when that PFC amygdala circuit breaks, the top-down control disappears. You become a victim of your own biology, reacting to every small fire as if it's a life-threatening emergency. Understanding that your business brain lives here is the first step to reclaiming your power. You aren't losing your edge, you're just losing your connection to your headquarters. We need to learn how to keep the PFC fueled, and more importantly, how to keep it talking to the deeper, more reactive parts of your brain. If the CEO isn't communicating with the security team, the whole building goes into lockdown. That lockdown is exactly what happens when the amygdala takes over, and that is what we are going to dive into next, so you can spot the hijack before it happens. If the prefrontal cortex is the CEO, then the amygdala is the overzealous head of security who hasn't slept in 3 days. This almond-shaped cluster deep in your temporal lobe has one job: keep you alive. It doesn't care about your quarterly projections or your reputation on LinkedIn. It only cares about detecting threats. In the early days of human history, that threat was a predator in the tall grass. Today, for the modern entrepreneur, the predator is a passive-aggressive Slack message, a dip in website traffic, or the realization that you forgot to sign your kid's permission slip. When the amygdala senses these stressors, it doesn't wait for a memo from the CEO. It bypasses the logical PFC entirely and triggers a survival response. This is the amygdala hijack. Research shows that when this happens, the amygdala actually increases in volume and activity while the PFC physically weakens. It's a literal hostile takeover of your neural real estate. You feel this as a racing heart, a tightening in your chest, or a sudden hot flash of irritability. This is the biology of why the dinner table hijack feels so impossible to stop in the moment. Your brain has shifted into a threat imminence mode where the priority is survival, not connection. The security guard has locked the doors, pulled the fire alarm, and is screaming through a megaphone, making it impossible for the CEO to hear herself think. The problem for high-achieving women is that we often live in a state of chronic hijack. Because our roles are so demanding, the amygdala stays on high alert, scanning for the next potential catastrophe. It begins to treat every email like a physical assault. When you are in this state, you lose your ability to see the big picture. You become hyper-focused on the negative, a phenomenon called aberrant defensive responding. You stop seeing opportunities and start seeing only risks. This is why you might find yourself obsessing over one negative comment on social media while ignoring 100 positive ones. The amygdala is Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. It creates a feedback loop where your physical stress reinforces your mental anxiety, making the disconnect even deeper. You aren't being dramatic or emotional. You are experiencing a biological system that is stuck in the on position. This security guard is trying to protect you, but he's actually burning the office down to keep the burglars out. To fix this, we have to understand that the amygdala is incredibly fast. It processes information in milliseconds, far quicker than the logical PFC can. By the time you realize you're stressed, the hijack is already well underway. The goal isn't to delete the amygdala. We need it to stay safe. The goal is to rebuild the communication bridge so the PFC can step in and say, hey, put the megaphone down. It's just an email, not a tiger. Without this intentional intervention, you remain a passenger in a vehicle driven by your most primitive fears. We have to learn how to interrupt this automatic loop before it drains your last bit of executive energy. If we don't, the CEO stays offline and you stay stuck in survival mode. The reason this bridge between your CEO brain and your security guard brain stays broken is because modern entrepreneurship is a biological mismatch. Our brains evolved in an environment where stress was a physical event with a clear beginning, middle, and end. You ran from the predator, you escaped, and your nervous system returned to a baseline of safety. But for you, the predator never actually leaves the room. It lives in your pocket, buzzing every 6 minutes. It sits in your inbox at 3 in the morning. This creates a state of perpetual proximity to threat that our anatomy simply wasn't designed to handle. When you are constantly bombarded by microstressors, a late shipment, a school nurse calling, a dip in revenue, the circuit between the PFC and the amygdala doesn't just flicker, it eventually fries. Research into neuroplasticity shows that the brain is like a muscle. Whatever circuit you use the most becomes the strongest. If you spend 16 hours a day in a state of reactive panic, you are physically thickening the fear highways of the amygdala and thinning the logic pathways of the PFC. This is why, after a few years of high-level grinding, you might feel like you've lost your personality. You used to be creative and patient, but now you're just a bundle of reflexes. This circuit break happens because the PFC requires quiet to maintain its top-down regulation. It needs space to process information and send calming signals back down to the emotional centers. But in the life of a female founder, quiet is a luxury you rarely have. You are likely dealing with the sandwich generation effect, where you are the emotional shock absorber for everyone in your life. You are managing the big emotions of your toddlers, the declining health of your parents, and the professional anxieties of your team. This constant emotional labor is like running a marathon for your prefrontal cortex. It drains your executive resources until there is nothing left to fuel the bridge. When the PFC is this exhausted, it can no longer veto the amygdala's impulses. This is how the disconnect becomes your new normal. You stop being a leader and start being a firefighter. You aren't just tired, you are neurologically fragmented. The bridge is out and the messages aren't crossing the divide. This is exactly why current advice like just take a vacation or try to be more positive feels so insulting. It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk more cheerfully. You can't think your way out of a physiological break. You have to physically repair the connection. If we don't address this as a structural issue in the brain, the disconnect will continue to leak into your family life and your business decisions. You'll keep having those dinner table hijacks because your brain is stuck in a loop where the security guard is the only one with the keys to the building. To fix this, we have to move past the theory and into the actual implementation of the CEO brain protocol. We need to learn how to manually override the alarm system and force the CEO back into the driver's seat using specific research-validated techniques. To fix this, we need a manual override. You can't wait for your brain to feel calm to start acting calm. You have to use your body to force the CEO back online. The first and most powerful tool in your 20-minute CEO brain protocol is somatic reattribution. This is a fancy clinical term for a very simple shift. You need to stop labeling your physical sensations as anxiety and start labeling them as data. When your heart starts racing before a big pitch, your amygdala tells you that you're failing or in danger. Somatic reattribution allows the PFC to step in and say, my heart is beating fast because my body is preparing oxygen for a high performance moment. Research shows that when you relabel these physiological symptoms, you actually reduce the amygdala's power and increase your cognitive anchoring. You aren't panicking, you are preparing. This simple flipping narrative keeps the bridge intact. Next, we use the 4-4-4-4 breathing technique, often called box breathing. This isn't just relaxing, it is a tactical intervention for your nervous system. When you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4, you are sending a direct signal through the vagus nerve to the brainstem. You are telling the security guard that the building is safe. A study from Nature Scientific Reports found that this specific type of mindful breathing significantly improves cognitive flexibility and reduces perceived stress. It literally creates the quiet your PFC needs to reboot. If you are in the middle of a dinner table hijack, excuse yourself for 2 minutes. Go to the bathroom, do 3 rounds of box breathing, and use somatic reattribution to tell yourself, my brain is just tired, not broken. This interrupts the automatic loop and allows you to walk back into that room as the mother you want to be. Finally, we have to look at the long game, neuroplasticity. To keep the PFC strong, you need to exercise it through intentional focus. This means setting a CEO power hour every morning where you do your most complex, deep thinking work before the world starts screaming at you. When you protect this time, you are thickening those PFC pathways. You are proving to your brain that the CEO is in charge of the schedule, not the inbox. Research into habit change suggests that disrupting these automatic behavioral loops requires consistent small wins. Don't try to fix your whole life at once. Start by mastering the first 60 seconds of a stress response. Use your breath, relabel the sensation, and then make one logical choice. Over time, these small moments of integration build a bridge that is strong enough to handle any business pivot or family crisis. You are moving from a state of reactive firefighting to a state of proactive leadership. You are reclaiming your neural real estate. The PFC amygdala disconnect is the silent tax on every female entrepreneur, but it doesn't have to be your permanent reality. By understanding that your CEO brain brain needs specific physiological support, you can stop blaming your character and start managing your anatomy. You now have the tools to spot the hijack, interrupt the loop with tactical breathing, and relabel your stress as performance data. This is how you stay present for the bright eyes at the dinner table while still being the powerhouse leader your company needs. You are capable of building an incredible legacy without burning your brain to the ground in the process. Your internal executive is finally back in charge and the bridge is open. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more science-backed strategies for the high-stakes brain. Now go take one deep breath and reclaim your focus. I'll see you in the next video.